So what's everybody drinking? I'm back on. So one of the advantages to being gone for the weekend is my stores of Beck's were not depleted. So I'm back on the Beck's. What's everyone else doing?
I got a Union Cherry Blossom Ale.
Oh, sounds summery.
Yeah.
I've got what is it? Sunshine Hop Dream Hazy IPA from Sly Fox.
Nice.
I drank a lot of IPAs out in Kansas City, actually.
I have
I'm not a big IPA guy, but that was good stuff.
I have the Italian Beck's analog.
Oh yeah, yeah. The national beer of Italy and Germany.
I'll be doing more of this.
Yeah.
This,
I would, and I'll be marching around.
Okay.
Now that we've insulted everybody. Patrick, what are you drinking?
I went back to the high quality water.
You're such a disappointment, Patrick, I have to say.
I am disappointed. I'm not holding up the marketers drinking beer.
That's right.
It's false advertising, really.
I mean, you could say you're drinking Bud Light, which would be the same thing at that point.
Oh, burn.
Corona Light.
That's funny. Okay, so I've got 3 topics here. Dave is on vacation. He threw up the first one here, which is, our virtual event sponsorships worth it. I don't know if you guys had a chance to look at the article there, but it went through the different types of sponsorships that seem to be in favor nowadays. One of the advantages is that they're less expensive, but of course frankly, they're less costly. So, I mean, when I was going to events for Personify, I was spending 30 grand, plus my ridiculous sponsorship fee to ASAE, and which ridiculously high. It was worth it. We got a lot of value out of it. But
I like the qualification on that.
I'm doing some work for them right now. They're the best. No, I thought it was good. Before those big sponsorship deals, if you'll remember, they would sort of nickel and dime you to death in a way that somebody would call you the day before the annual and say, hey, would you like to introduce the keynote speaker? It's a $2,000 sponsorship. It's like, no, what, who? And so by putting on those big sponsorships, that really helped me a lot. So I'm certainly not complaining about that. But I think the only person that I know of is doing sponsorships right now is Patrick. Ray, you may be, I don't know.
Thought about it, but I'm just not ready to pull that trigger.
Yeah, sure. Patrick Berzai, are you doing sponsorships yet? Virtual?
No. The only thing we thought about doing was trying to shill out 1 or 2 of our company people into virtual events as a sponsorship. Other than that, no. So I'm trying to help you guys, use you guys, if you don't mind, to help make that decision.
Okay, great. So Patrick, I think you may have the most experience here. You want to tell us, Patrick Dorsey, you want to tell us what you're doing and how you think about it?
I would say as a starting point with, a lot of the opportunities that have been presented to me, recently, and I say recently, like in the last 2 months, because in many of these situations, it was an event we had committed to attend already or exhibit. We had a booth, that we, maybe not a large sponsorship package, but it started with the exhibit space. Obviously, those were canceled. So then they had to kind of repackage the whole program for us. And so, stating the obvious there. And I think one consistency amongst all these opportunities, and I'm going to reference like 3 in particular, was that it's an equal learning opportunity for the event organizer, right? So they kind of came with, we'll say, the vanilla offering, but it was always finished with, we're willing to be creative. If you have something that you want to try or you guys want to do, let us know and maybe we can build something, which I thought was, in the spirit of everything going around, was a welcoming as opposed to take it or leave it, right? That being said, it was probably necessary because their offerings were not overly creative, right? It was a lot of, oh, we'll put your logo here, right? And you can introduce the virtual speaker and we'll give you like a little 30-second pitch. things that were equally less appealing on a virtual sense as they were, Paul, as you mentioned in the live sense, right? Because ultimately right now we're trying to find ways to differentiate ourselves. We're trying to find ways to build one-on-one conversations. And they were not, these packages were really more eyeballs than anything else. Which created like an interesting dilemma because I feel in 2 out of the 3 instances, they had higher registration, right? Because of the less travel and all the things that would go into that, they were able to send more people were registered, and I think the events also were lowering fees as we've discussed that in other events. So I'm hoping that even by, this was an interesting, discussion that we had. Because they were bringing more people to the show and we were getting exposure just as an exhibitor, I felt less inclined to actually invest additional dollars in the sponsorship because they were already more people there. Now, it creates the same challenge. How do I distinguish myself amongst others, even with more people going? But I felt like the greater number of eyeballs, right? The tide's going to raise all boats, if you will. We were still going to get a bang for our buck or an ROI without having to invest in some of these kind of, fluffy little sponsorship packages, right? And what I challenged both of them is that here's what I want. Like, I want this demographic within your target, on your audience list, because, Paul knows, Ray knows, and Tom does to an extent. You might get a registration list, but the details of it are somewhat varied, right? So as we've discussed, trying, in a lot of the work that Patrick shared with us, we're trying to make some data-informed decisions. So I said, like, I might only be focused on this 10% of your registration list. And if you can find a way for me to get in front of them, or work with me to get in front of them, even if you push the email, obviously I'm going to be flexible here, but like, that's all I care about. I don't care about the other 90% or 80-20 rule, whatever you do it. They're still hesitant to kind of meet me in the middle of the road because, they're, I mean, I don't want to throw people under the bus, but they're still like, well, what about this banner ad? I'm like, I don't want a banner ad.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. The problem is I don't think the systems, the technology is set up to actually, on most of these platforms, to be able to target that way. I mean, wouldn't it be great if
in the platform, Ray, but they can, again, I can find, let's work with we all have partners, right? And I can do certain things for my partners where I build like a package and I don't charge them for it. I just want their business to be, strong, and I want stickiness to my business for my customer. Win-win.
Yeah.
So if they can say hey, we'll still push the email, we'll create this opportunity for you, and we'll do the warm intro, they're still not willing to do that because they're like, well, if we do that for you, we have to do it for everybody. And they're like,
you don't have to tell anybody.
For me, because I'm paying.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I found that they're not really warming to that, which again, that's what I want. We all have our target addressable market, and I will pay a premium for that, especially in this environment, more so than anything else. And I felt they're still going back to their old tactics.
Mm-hmm.
So my observation has been the fact, and so the clients I've been working with on this, the people that are doing it are coming from, for the most part, they're traditional sponsorship salespeople and traditional event people. They're not necessarily marketing people. So once I start having the conversations as a marketer of what are the things I value as a marketer, that's when I start getting creative. Could we do this? Could we do that? And I was trying to get one client was like, why don't you offer retargeting pixels? You could actually sell that, put a retargeting pixel on the site for a sponsor.
I think GDPR doesn't let you do that because you're using the data for, I don't know, I could be wrong, but you're using a data for the different reason than it was intended. Because that is a great idea. But we used to do that in pharma, and then they took that away. And you had to you had 2 separate sites. Never mind, long story. But I think you're not allowed to do that terrific idea.
Or you could do it, or if it's a sponsored session. I mean, think about it as a package, as a sponsored session.
Yeah.
You look at the page for the session. It's only on that session page. Boom. Now that'd be a good way to do it. But again, it's like those things as a marketer that I want to see to the eyeballs, the segmentation, and so on and so forth.
They're not thinking like that, Ray. And I again, I'll leave names out of it, but we all know our good friend, the former ASAE sales rep, but like they just like that, right? They just wanted to say like, hey, if you buy this banner ad, I'll even get you in the print mag. And I was like,
Yeah.
and again, there's a place for that. I don't want to discredit what, there certain programs, these are great elements to have in your program. And they might be a great complement to what I want to do as well. So again, I know we're being a little tongue in cheek here, but like, if you want me to invest more, which is what this conversation's about, in this sponsorship and how we can do things differently, it really has to start with how we're thinking about it and how we're going to approach them differently. And they have to be willing to be able to look at the data, and to Ray's point, if that's what it is, to think more like marketers and be like, how can I take this resource I have, this asset of this registration list, and better package it so that it's more appealing to someone like Ray or myself or Tom Lehman, right, who have our brand and we want to get it in front of people.
I'm sorry to have joined you all late. That just totally lost track of the time. On a call with somebody else, forgot all about it. But it's funny to come into this part because it feels like I've been in this conversation off and on for years. And one of the things that struck me when you were talking, and maybe you already talked about this, so tell me if you have, but there's an orientation on sponsorship certainly among certain organizations, and we know who that is, where they're not trying to provide a service to you per se. They're giving you the opportunity to be in front of these people. They think
so
it's
true.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not, we're not trying to meet your needs.
Yeah.
We're, people stand in line to be able to be a sponsor for our show, and all the other stuff's a little, we'll give you email lists, that'll be help give you some benefit.
Yeah, in fact, membership for an organization that will go unnamed essentially gives you the right.
I'm like the only one that doesn't know
Exactly.
the names. I'm like, whatever you guys are talking about, sure. But
It gives you the right to buy sponsorships. Aren't
The
you
right to buy sponsorship. That's exactly it.
the privilege?
oh, that's
So when you were saying, well, you could package that up and it would be a product people would buy, it's like, oh, well, who would you tell that to?
Yeah. Yeah.
But the traditional sponsorship model of these events is all about eyeballs. It's about that branding. It's just how many eyeballs can you get out there, and the numbers are. And I, way back in the day, there was literally a sponsorship organization that I worked with. This is before I was in association world, and they had a formula, and this was around event sponsorship. Your logo on a ticket is worth 2 cents ROI, and literally and you would fill out the sponsorship, so on and so forth. And this is how you determine the ROI, and this is what you insert company presents name of show here, and then the signage and so on and so forth. And they all that's the way they sold it as an ROI. And these organizations with that traditional model, they just went after anything that you could put an eyeball in front of. They charged for, to the point, and I will out them. I did the launch of. Are you all familiar with Rigid Power Tools? Orange, sold at Home Depot.
Okay.
probably seen them, but don't know. Yeah.
So I worked on the launch of that brand. And at the International Builders Show, we did a guerrilla campaign where we put signs up in the bathroom. And we said, are your tools rigid? Visit us at booth 1, blah, 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 blah.
Shame on you. Go on.
Sure enough, the next year, NAHB was selling bathroom sponsorships above all the others.
I love it.
That's what you get for innovating.
And they
One
didn't
year we
give
just
you a
take a
cut
piece of
off
sign up, and next year we have to pay, a few $1,000.
I love it.
Yeah, that's a different
I love
model.
it.
Like, give them free drinks and charge them to go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
Work it the other way. Yeah.
That's funny.
And I think
That's true. That's true. The more they drink, the more eyeballs see your ad.
All the eyeballs they get, exactly.
That's
They're
good.
going to have to become more creative with the assets they have and break it down into more targeted campaigns, especially if for the foreseeable future. And I mean, really, are we talking about the first half of 2021 right now?
We're talking all of 2021.
Like who's going to have events, live in-person events. And so they're going to, and I feel there's an opportunity here, if I were on the other side of the fence, right, and I can send you my resume watching this, but, like there's a great opportunity to still look at that eyeball model and drive more people to these shows because of you're eliminating travel and hotels and all those expenses, and then find ways to really create content that appeals so you can grow the event registration list. And then that gives you even stronger assets to then resell or repackage for someone. And I feel until they start thinking like that and you get that pull through, we're all going to be having, like as Tom said, like, I came late. This is deja vu, right? Like we'll be having a conversation next summer because it's the same thing. And then the creativity will lie on us, until someone raises their hand, because without the booth and that ability to like scan badges and all that stuff and then be creative on our own end, or as Ray said, find ways to do some guerrilla marketing, or steal the leads from someone else. Like we're going to be at this one, like, what am I doing here? Right? Like it's going to raise that ROI question, and we're all going to be smarter than that.
And the downfall that's going to come for the people selling the event sponsorships is because this is web and because every URL is unique, it's all trackable. So the fluff that you got from selling in a virtual association is like, I have X number of attendees and they can all come to your booth and so on and so forth. Now as a marketer, I'm like, I want to see the web analytics. I want to see how many people looked at my sponsorship page. I want to put a form there. I want to know how many leads I got through that. As marketers, we're going to be that much more data and analytics driven on looking for those results and wanting that ROI.
Our friends in the hospitality industry have this concept of the hosted buyer conference. Are you guys familiar with that?
No.
So
No.
you pay $10,000 or whatever, and they guarantee you X number of visits to your booth. It's a physical event. So, and they do that by flying the people there. So they will identify people in your target demographic. They will go out and say, I think you need to come to this event. There'll be some educational stuff, but we're going to pay to fly you here and put you up and feed you and things like that, provided that you choose to go and have half-hour meetings with 10 of the exhibitors. And so that's been a successful thing for them. I think meetings in general for hospitality are kind of rough because you really don't need to physically be with someone in the hospitality space. In software, it helps because you can say, what happens when you push that button? And the guy doing the demo in the booth will push that button for you. So anyway, I don't know, maybe there's something there now that everything is digital that these organizations could.
So would you call that like the speaker timeshare model? Is that what that is?
Speaker timeshare, yeah.
Kind of sounds like it's timeshare. Like you get to, you get to come to this event, but you got to talk to these people.
Right. Exactly. Something like that. Yeah. Well, that's what they do. I mean,
yeah. No, you're saying it works. Yeah.
It's very successful for them. And as a sponsor, yeah, it's going to be more expensive, but I'm going to have 10 people in my booth. 10 people, and you can sort of, carve out your demographic, and they will go follow those 10 people.
And even if it's
has a division that runs conferences just for that, and they always have it at South Carolina. Like, I'm not pronouncing this right, like Kauai Island or one of those like resorts, and they'll basically guarantee you X amount of pre-qualified leads, people that are searching for your product.
Correct.
They'll fly them. I don't know if it's the same model. They'll fly them down there, but they get right up to the door of almost guaranteeing it that this is what we'll deliver, and then you can do your own like close percentage and funnel, calculations to see if it justifies. But I've seen that model, and it's a division of Naylor for people that know that, like publishing group, that just in the last 2 years that I have to admit, I look at it and I have multiple calls with their sales rep, probably to the point he thinks I'm wasting their time, just because I'm very curious of like, this may make sense when you think about all the other opportunities where we're flying people around the country to go to, you know, all that stuff that overflows it. And from an ROI standpoint, if I can send like 2 people down to that show, 3 people, just to work the room, have like a demo, like you're not, you know, almost like a demo shop, just coming through in the value prop, you build some relationship, and then obviously we're going to follow up. It's like speed dating. I feel I can get better ROI than sending 6 guys in a booth, you know, and working the show in Columbus, Ohio.
Yeah.
But I also have to believe in the virtual model, there's got to be a method or a way to identify and build that value of, I mean, almost even like building it into the, I'm just brainstorming here, almost building it into the pricing of, are you coming to this virtual event seriously to learn, or how close are you to actually purchasing software? And are you a decision maker? And then, yeah, would you like a lower, you know, it's $1,000 for whatever, $750 to attend event. But if you're willing to meet with certain number of vendors who are sponsoring us, we'll drop it to $450.
Well, in a way, Ray, we've seen that to a certain extent with like a group like AMS Fest, right?
Yeah, yeah.
This is a if you are attending this show,
You are pre-qualified.
the numbers, I can say, validate it from my 3 or 4 years attending the show. So what this difference is, Patrick, it's very similar to the model that Paul mentioned, but there's a show called AMS Fest. And you basically saying, by I'm registering for this event, we are about to make a technology decision or review our current, you know, CRM, AMS product in the next 12 to 18 months. And so, you know, even though that show is smaller in an attendance wise, and there's no exhibits, so you're not wasting time or money, all you're doing is you got 2 demo slots, 1 a day on a 2-day conference, and then you can schedule meetings around it. But it's a pre-qualified buyer, which is really going back to where we started this. If you can get me in front of pre-qualified, you know, attendees, right? Like, then I'm willing to I just want to be in the shopping cart when you go shopping. And then I'm willing to, in hand-to-hand combat, I'm going to win. I'm going to win more often than not. But I appreciate that they're pre-qualified and I don't have to do the whole booth dance, right? There's value to that. I meet customers at those shows. But we got prospects that are going. And believe me, that show is a great ROI, and it could be repeated for different technologies, right?
Yeah.
Be very complementary.
I could totally see the overhaul where what they do is, as people would sign up, everyone would go in there, and it'd be like Tinder. Do you guys know what Tinder is? That dating app where you swipe left if you don't like them, and you swipe right if you do. And if they mutually swipe, bam, you guys are matched and you could talk to each other. So what they could do is create an app for the digital world like this. You guys would all just start swiping on each other, and then they kind of like spit out a price. I'm half being facetious, but it's almost like this. What is this? It's like a transaction, right? It's almost like a matchmaker kind of thing, like that people see events. And so that's the mechanism. And so how much do you make it like that in terms of how we think about it? And maybe the organization doesn't want to think, oh, this is just transactional for these people. But for them it is. And so maybe the organization, to your point, Patrick, it just needs to acknowledge it. It's like, all right, so for a sponsorship, you know what? Make me a deal. I can match you up with people, but make me a deal. It's almost like you almost want them to ask you. Maybe that's what I'm not hearing in your frustration. It's like, no, we have these, you can buy eyeballs. You could buy, you know, the thing we have to sell you, but if you're not going to buy one of these things, I'm not going to sell you anything. And you're like,
and you brought it up, but I don't, to Ray's point, they like, it's so foreign for them. And they almost say like, I want to sell you value, but they're not fully comprehending that the value is, to your point, I just want 10%. I'm willing to walk away from the 90 or 80%, but the value that I defined is X, Y, and Z based on my demographics, you know, or target, your sweet spot, however you want to frame it. Like, that's the value, and they're not willing to like peel that back and then build a package around it. And equally, I'm willing to participate because it's new, right? So let's figure out what works. But there's going to be risk on my end too, right? And I feel there's no, like, this is something like, as Paul said, you know, someone who has spent a lot of money from a sponsorship package, you know, in our industry, like, you know, this would have resonated 10 years ago. Maybe we didn't have all the tools to figure out, break it down to the level we have now, but still we're always in that pursuit of one-to-one conversations.
What if
One thing to interject, partly for Patrick's benefit because he's not in this industry. So one of the fundamental differences between what we were talking about first with associations and what we were talking about later with AMS Fest, which I wasn't, as you all know, wasn't a big early fan of. But AMS Fest is run by a company as a commercial enterprise. The others are being run by associations at their annual meetings and so forth. So the purpose of those meetings is not the trade show. The trade show is the way to generate revenue.
But that's
that's a good
AMS
distinction,
Fest is oriented exactly to, we have to show value or people aren't going to pay us money because that's the only thing this show is about.
I was actually in Montreal once and in Quebec, and they're not the biggest fans of Americans, and so I was eating at a restaurant, and you always tip after the meal, and I got this idea because this guy, my waiter, was not very nice, but then just like all the Quebecois, and then I tipped him like I should, and he goes, oh, I didn't know you were going to tip me like this. You know what I mean? And so I thought to myself, like, maybe you should tip before the meal and then get what you get. And maybe these conferences should have you pay after the conference. It's like, look, here are the prices for these things. Whatever you got, pay me after. So that incentivizes them for that reason. But what you just said, Tom, makes a lot of sense. It's like, some conferences are geared toward one thing and to the other. That's what you have to think about is the purpose, and are the purposes the same? But that would be an interesting way to look at it, right? It's like, you know what? I'll give you money after I'm at the event. How about that? And make them hustle that way,
I knew some guys in St. Paul, Minnesota, when I lived up there, who were very successful, ran a very successful consulting firm, working primarily with public entities, state governments, county governments, and a lot of state governments. And the guys in there, the principals, had state experience, had been ministers of this and that, finance and so forth. But their pitch was a big strategy kind of orientation. Don't just increment, but do a bigger picture. And they had a deal with if they went to various states, they said, we'll come in for one day or one afternoon and do a presentation. At the end of the presentation, you've got three choices. You can continue to go with us and do a larger engagement. You can decide that what we gave you was valuable, but that's all you need, and you will pay us what you think that's worth. Or three, you can just tell us to go home. Super successful.
I bet. Guilt probably comes into that a lot, though.
What's that?
I don't know. There's other elements where you can, I just wonder how, because that's a great pitch, because what would make someone say no to that? Like, it seems no risk, especially if they know how to be a jerk.
Well, and you're also conveying, I've got so much confidence in my brand and my ability that even if you decide that's all you need, you'll pay me a fair amount of money.
Right. I don't know if you guys know the band Radiohead. They started doing that. They released their own albums, and it was charge what you will. And they made way more money than they would have by that barrier to entry, even though so many people paid them like 1 cent, something like that. Some people actually found a lot of, I found a lot of value in it.
I paid 10.
There you go. It's like, here you go, Radiohead. Here's
well,
your
you
loot.
triggered that thought when you said pay after the event.
Yeah. That's a good, because you're going to get more people on the front end. A lot of the thing is the risk of not getting what you want, right? And then that price is the barrier to entry. If what you can do is usher everybody through first, you might actually make more volume by doing the same thing. That's the one thing about event is the space. It's almost like a SaaS product. You can keep expanding it. Same content, right? I'm oversimplifying it.
No,
but like just bring more people through. And I know I'm going to get some of those cheapskates, but I'm also going to get the people who are like, what do I do? Okay, I'll just go, and then I'll pay afterwards because they actually see value. A lot of people actually do pay for value.
Yeah, I think they're more committed than that, though. The biggest cost, like to go to AMS Fest or what you were talking about, Paul, with the hotels, is not the dollars. I mean, yeah, okay, you'll pay me to fly down there and stay at the hotel, but I got to commit 3 days to that,
Mm-hmm.
right? In the case of my friends, the requirement was that you had to put together the high level decision team, and they had to spend several hours with you and I mean, that was the cost. So they had to make that commitment. They didn't just say, oh, well, hell, just okay, come.
Yeah.
You know what's so embarrassing about this call for me is I realized I have been the mark in some of these events. That's why I was there. That's why.
And did you
It was
swipe
like,
left or right?
one of the times it was sad because I was leaving the agency I was with to go to a new agency like 2 weeks later. And we already did business with some of the people, but I'm realizing now, like, it's probably about 4 or 5 times we go to like Key Largo or something like that. Like, sure, I'll do that. They're like, oh, and we just want you to give a little talk, like, okay, but that's not what they wanted me.
Right.
Oh,
You were going to say
man.
something. I interrupted you, Ray.
This is your timeshare reference, Patrick.
I was the timeshare. Oh,
Yeah.
I was going to say, though, that
gross.
Patrick just made a really good point about how these virtual events scale. And I think that's actually the opportunity. And I know we talked about pricing strategy a couple weeks ago, thinking about that. Like, there is an opportunity to change your pricing and revenue model on these virtual events of, yes, charge the sponsors enough, but make it worth their while, and then they can cover most of the costs. And that's what one of our clients did. Like, they went out to their sponsors and they said, we still want to do this event. Here's the package we put together. We're gonna scale it back. And their sponsors had like grant money that they're doing in for education around stuff. And because of that, they were able to scale from the traditional 400 people to 2,000. And the sponsor still got the value out of it, but that's because they built the event around the sponsor,
Mhm.
and then overlay that
Mhm.
content to make sure there's that value. Now, it has to be decent content from the sponsor. It can't just be shameless shilling, yada yada yada. The things which is we quality marketers would never do all the time, is with quality content that way. But that's the way to do it, because your model then changes. Because right now all these events are based off of I'm going to get
Mhm.
70% of my revenue on my attendance fees and then so much sponsor. Flip that,
Mhm.
because your physical costs went down, and you can make it a better event, and you can make it worthwhile for sponsors.
Yeah, it would be, I think they need to build an incentive in there. So, I mean, the incentive on a face-to-face is that they're putting you on an airplane,
Mm-hmm.
feeding you and all that other stuff. So they would have to take part of their sponsorship fees for the meetings that we're talking about now and somehow direct those to people in order to get them to engage in a real way. I think that there's a big cultural issue because, ASE, for example, their mission is to educate people. Their mission isn't to, make money for sponsors. I mean, there is, but I can tell you that there are, as you guys all know, there are a lot of people just like, I'm not going to the exhibit hall. Why would I do that? I'm not, and so ASAE has worked really hard to try to solve that. I know, like from being on their board, they encourage us, and like it's like a job. We have to go down onto the floor and visit booths and do surveys. They use the board to do surveys just to try to get a little bit of something going there. But I don't think they've done a very good job of helping attendees understand that the reason their registration is $1,000 and not $4,000 is because guys like us are paying sponsorship and registration fees for booths. But I do know that when I last left, which is now 6 years ago, I guess, ASE had a pilot program going with Hosted Buyer. So they're aware of the issue, and they're struggling, I think, organizations like that, struggling to make that go forward. But I really do think they have to come up with that. They have to take some of that membership money, the sponsorship money or the exhibitor money, and channel that into incentives, direct incentives to the people that you want to talk to.
what I think is the missed opportunity, but I anticipate this coming in the foreseeable future, less than 2 years, is when you think about the data that they capture during an event registration or the possibility of capturing that you can almost have a shopping list in advance, right? Like in the same way, like simplify it like Amazon, people that bought this book also bought this book, right? So if you come in and you're like the director of IT at this type of organization and you clicked a couple other boxes of what you're looking for, like, I don't understand why during your registration, it shouldn't say, hey, you should visit to this point. You should visit these 4 booths. Like, they have that data. And if I share that with me, here's who we recommended to attend your booth because they fit this criteria that you helped define.
Yeah.
Like, now we're talking value, right? Because now we got that pre-selected list. It's not perfect, right? But we're getting closer to that, 80-20 rule. And they have that information. And when I actually brought this up with one of the groups, and they're like, well, I don't know. It's like they're not thinking about it yet.
We can totally do that in a virtual event, though. That's
what I'm saying. In the virtual event, they should be able to say, like, these people fit your criteria, Patrick Impexium, not Patrick, but Impexium, and they should know, like, if you've selected, I'm the director of IT at a $10 to $20 million org, and I'm going to make an AMS selection, it should spit out that here's 5 people you can look for. I don't care if they put my 4 other competitors there. I'm willing to go hand to hand and kick their ass. But, like, share with me then who got recommended, and let's start that conversation before the show.
You know what I could see happening if Ray's right about events being more digital than anything past 2021. We won't be talking about what we could take from analog events and turning into digital. We'll be talking about the opposite. So that's when we're going to start to tag lanyards of those little events, and then we'll trace where people went, or like we can even shock people. It's like, no, go to the right, dummy. That's the one. That's the place you're supposed to go. Like that's on your, so it can guide you around. So that's what we'll start to do in terms of things on its. Like
they're already doing that. Yeah.
I mean,
they're not shocking people, but yeah,
not shocking people.
See, that's the lost opportunity right there.
Since I have my Garmin on my desk for my bike, it's like when I go for a bike ride, it's like turn right up here as I put a route in. You walk around the floor, your badge can go turn right, turn left.
Or you could pay as a sponsorship for them to avoid your 4 competitors, and that's a premium. So you'd be like, oh no, avoid this guy. And then you get like a $20 credit to buy a drink at the hotel to avoid the guy. Like, just think about how you can make out that way if you want that one customer. It's untapped potential.
Yeah. We used to joke in the old days about doing like negative marketing where you'd have a bunch of pens, and Patrick Vectra was always the client that we talked about doing this. So you'd have a bunch of pens that had a Vectra on it, and they'd leak, and you just sort of distribute them leave them around the convention center. Oh man, what have your pockets all? That's a damn Vectra pen.
Buy a bunch of those little urinal soap things with your competitor's logo on there, and everyone just pees on it. Yep. I could see that working. And then that's after they paid to pee, so they're already mad.
From the sponsored.
Yeah.
Well, that's when they
so
look
I paid
down
to pee,
because
and now we got to look at
they're
this. Screw these guys. Never buying them.
All
or
right.
it could be the little target on the urinal.
Yeah. That was a helpful. I don't know, Patrick, was that helpful to you, Patrick Rezai?
Yeah, it was. It was. I never really think in terms of sponsorships turning them down or not by thinking outside the box. That was a good thing to think about. So what can I get out of this? I usually think about what are they selling me and whether I like it or not. I really should be trying to be more entrepreneurial. I think that's the lesson I really learned. And saying, hey, can you do X for me in this? And that way we'll start to shell out the dollars because, they're kind of hurting most of these people in terms of what they're looking at. And there's a lot of not to be a jerk, but understanding the leverage because they've always had it is job count. You know what I mean? Like if this isn't successful, like this is a lot of these events, like we have an ad week event. Like if they don't do this, like they're laying people off, so they have to find money somewhere. And so that's what I'll really think about more than anything else.
And I think the important thing for anyone that's on the sponsorship sales side is watching this to remember, we marketers, we still have, and every B2B marketer I talk to, our numbers haven't changed.
Yeah,
Like
it's true.
we still have to drive the same number of leads, market qualified leads, close. Like those didn't change on us. Our tactics and our tools and our toolbox just changed. So offering me the same old shit that worked in 2019 in a physical event isn't going to work. Let's be creative. Bring me the things that are going to bring me qualified leads, real opportunities, and close sales, and people will spend.
Mm-hmm.
I would argue it didn't work in 2019, so this global event should really push them to finally making some like constructive, steps forward. But
Yeah.
I'll leave it at that.
I think a piece of advice, if I was to, hearing this conversation, if I was to give a piece of advice to the people who are selling sponsorships or events is put it back on your exhibitors or your sponsors. What do they want? And as long as they're not, trampling over your mission statement or your purpose for being, as long as it makes sense for the people who are going to attend the meeting, who I completely understand, that's your first charge.
Yeah.
Why not give them that opportunity?
The power dynamic has certainly shifted.
Sorry, Patrick. One of the things I don't think they give us enough credit for, but Ray touched on it, a couple minutes ago, is if we're just so overtly over the top salesy, like it doesn't do us any good, right? Like no one wants to talk to us. So if I'm gonna sponsor, a session or a speaker, I'm gonna bring one of my customers who has a great case study of how they leverage technology, and that's going to get the implied benefit because we know they were using Impexium. Like I just want to be the hero of the story. I don't have to beat them over the head with my Impexium logo. And I don't think we get enough credit as marketers for thinking like, we agree with you. We don't do this like, car salesman. And unfortunately, some people may still do this. And so it's in their head, but that's not our goal because I understand the benefit 100% of not doing that. Right?
Yep. Yeah.
Well, they all get flamed, right? They get flamed on the community, and it never ceases to happen. Some new salesperson, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, responds to a post like, "I'm trying to figure out what I should do about X, Y, and Z." What you should do is buy, X and Y and Z from me, and they will be crucified. So it happens all the time. They do a lot of
less than it used to be.
Less than it used to be, yeah. I think ASAE, as for one example, has done a lot of good work trying to educate people. Like, this is not going to work.
And you see it if you've ever done like reviews and you go to conferences where they do have the sessions that are blatant sales pitches and blatant demos. Like you see people just get up and walk out, and that's fine. I mean, maybe there should be like a plaid suit fee on your sponsorship. Are you offering?
I'm telling you guys, Tinder. It's got to do the Tinder, just like swipe right.
Yeah,
I'm done. I'm sorry, swipe left.
I think what underlies this whole conversation, a couple of people have mentioned it in one way or another, is that we're in a transition period, and we're trying to figure out the elements from the old model and how they work in the new model, but we don't know what the new model is yet.
Trying to solve the same problem though, Tom. Like what they said, we're still marketer, we're still responsible for this stuff. We're the person that it didn't change for, Ugh.
That part doesn't change.
Right. That's the part.
But the model of how these events are going to take place has to change, in my view. Even if we go back to traveling, it's never going to be quite the same.
I think the hybrid model, because they'll be smart if they can expand the people attending who don't want to travel, or otherwise don't have the budget to travel. Like, why could they not have a hybrid form, right? And as marketers, we'll have to adjust and build programs or nets at the top of our funnel to capture both those audiences and engage with them in perhaps some traditional ways and some new ways as well. I'd love that. That would be like almost the best of both worlds from a marketing standpoint.
Yeah. Well, the hardest thing when you're changing models is to resist the old model and go back to why the old model existed to begin with. Which, as Patrick says, the marketing part hasn't changed. And so if you forgot all about it, tried to forget all about it and go back and say, okay, we're a trade association, we're a professional association. Part of our role is to provide education. And we have these companies that are partners, and their role is to market. And if we align all these different when we line up all these different requirements, what kind of a thing, what kind of event would we create that would satisfy all that? And I'll bet it would look a lot different than the traditional annual meeting trade show.
No doubt.
Mhm.
I may have told you, I may have told one or two of you this story. I won't use his name, but he's a guy who sells sponsorships for different organizations. I think 3 or 4 of us maybe know who he is. But he said that he would, would meet with his clients and they'd say, well, the meeting's going to be a 3-day meeting and it's on these dates. And he'd say, you realize you don't actually have to do 3 days or those dates? And they were just working so hard to replicate the exact experience. And it's just, you can't do
Exactly.
that.
They oriented it wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, and so people have to get and it's going to be tough because you're going to have to bring the audience along or your attendees along. Like, wait a minute, I remember when I can't remember who went to a new model a while ago. It might have been ASAE. They went to that experience model, and I was still working. I was like, wait, what is this? I was like, I was trying to figure that out. I had left by that time, I think, but. So it's going to take a while to bring people along with what that new model looks like. But I think they've just got to change it. You just can't take a face-to-face meeting and replicate it online. I think you can do it for attendees to a certain extent, but from the sponsor and exhibitor perspective, it cannot be done.
Now, I mean, a lot of our conversation has been more around associations and stuff like that, but you do have large for-profit companies that do
Sure.
events as well. I mean, Patrick, you mentioned AdTech earlier as an example. Which
We're doing our annual one this week.
okay, so
We don't sell sponsorships though, but I'm thinking about it.
I mean, what are they? How are those for-profit trade show events? Are all designed around like going to find things. What are they? What are you seeing that they're offering up that's worthwhile, or are they just trying to take the physical model online?
Well, if you're asking me, I haven't been in this industry long enough to go to those for-profit ones on the like the client side. I'm still ruminating about how I was made the mark in terms of the other events I've been invited to. I'm like, oh my God, you were so duped at that. I know there's this old thing like if you guys have ever read Lord of the Flies, if you're looking around and you don't know which one Piggy is, it's you. And I keep thinking of that when I think about all these events I went to, mostly in Florida, where I'm like, well, I mean, it can't be that bad. I was in Florida, but I was a mark. But anyway, I don't know. I will say though, I've seen a couple of like things that are like semi in between. So one of the things that we deal with a lot are like publishers who are like the IAB is the International Association of Broadcasters, things like that are like associations where they did events and they've gone online. But the people that they tend to let buy sponsorships online have nothing to do with the event. But it would be like you would do 5-minute break and they would do yoga with you, and then there'd be placement. You know what I mean? So they're more localized. Like they decided to do it that way. So it has nothing to do with anything else. It's like, we'll get these people to pay for X. You'll be able to talk to these ad agency people who, by the way, do a ton of yoga. So they still think about the audience that way in terms of like selling access. It's an interesting thing. You would think that like they wouldn't go local like that, but maybe that's how hard up they are. But more than that, I'm not sure, to answer your question.
So
I think it's going to blow up. I think the idea of having these mass events, once you're into the digital world, the advantage of having all those people together in one space, which is the basis of a lot of these commercial shows like Consumer Electronics Show and some of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that that's a value add anymore. And the idea that in some of these educational events, like the annual meetings and things, there are these different tracks and they try to group, but what they're really doing is they're trying to get an economy of scale in order to provide different slices of education to different audiences. Well, you don't need that economy of scale anymore. So maybe the annual meeting for ASAE and this is really sort of a simplistic blowing it apart. It just becomes a series of 40 meetings over the course of the year, very specific targeted areas sponsored by or in conjunction with or whatever. I mean, there's no reason everybody has to be in the same place.
Well, there's one
Now, you
exception.
can always build in a physical part, you know, if you want to see this in person or, but
Yeah.
a lot of the products aren't even physical things anymore, right?
Mhm.
You want to see this demo in person. Well, what does that mean?
But there's one exception to that, and I'll take the example of HubSpot. You know, when you get 5,000 marketers together and you're
Mhm.
able to build that sense of excitement, and here are the new products, you're hearing it for the first time, and it's this incredible interaction. Now, that doesn't go on to a lesser extent at association.
Yeah, it's harder to get someone to join an online cult like HubSpot.
Yes, yes. And
I
so
kind of
when,
think
you know,
they're a cult.
when
But
the meeting is over,
Guilty.
you know, the 10,000 marketers turning out onto the streets of Boston, there's some power there and some advantage and some value.
talking about lines for going to the bathroom after the HubSpot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Right?
BigCommerce
Yeah,
is like
But they
I'll tell you-
all have that.
Salesforce is
All have that
sponsored.
ad on the urinal.
I'll tell you a HubSpot story is they completely botched it. I mean, you couldn't get into events. It was the logistics of that meeting were horrible. And they had like food trucks and you couldn't get to food trucks, but it was really hot. And so people didn't want to eat outside. So people were sitting on the floors all over the new convention center there in Southie. And so they opened up like a big hall, you know, that just had tables in it, but they didn't turn on the lights. So you could go in and you could sit and you could eat. And when you walked into the door and looked at that, all you could see were all the little lights from people's laptops. It was like a
Yeah.
solar system blinking on and off. And
Go eat in the dark cafeteria, you loser.
yeah, exactly right. Okay, well, on that note, this was a great conversation. You know, I always prepare a couple of topics, 2 or 3 topics, and we never seem to get beyond the first one. So we'll recycle some of the topics for next time. I'm going to suggest, a couple of my friends who sell sponsorships watch this. So we'll break it up into 6 equal pieces and publish them. I think it was a valuable chat.
Yeah, put them on blast and flame them.
That's exactly right. All right, everybody. Thanks so much. We'll see
So
you
I want to
next
say
week.
one thing
Oh, yeah. What's that?
to Patrick there. That is one of my favorite Van Goghs behind you.
Right? Isn't it great? Just change it today.
But I will tell you,
you have a Van
Don't
Gogh of
get-
Patrick Horsey's bedroom.
Isn't that
I'm a-
crazy?
yeah, I'm a puzzle guy. I like
God.
hard puzzles. I have that puzzle,
That's got to be so hard.
2,000 pieces or something. It's fucking impossible.
I bet it's impossible.
I've done about this much. In
I would bet that's really hard.
months.
At one of the last agencies I was at, the analytics department did a 10,000 piece puzzle over like a quarter of Guernica. I don't know if you guys know Guernica, but it's all black and white. It's all a bunch of straight lines and round lines. Oh, it took them forever. And then they were missing 2 pieces at the end. But they were so bitter that they sent away, and the company actually sent them the 2 pieces. I saw the picture somewhere. But yeah, you're right, Tom. This would be.
I'm
Is that
better
here?
with.
Is it here? Is it here? Is it down here? Oh my God! All that blue. Ugh.
Oh yeah. No, it's.
And which side is it on?
His
It's
are hard
reflection.
anyway. I've done others of his, and they're hard anyway. But that one,
I bet
that particular one, is really hard.
this is the one
So
where I
on that
put on
note-
25 pieces.
Yeah, 25 I could do.
Take me a week.
Okay, guys. We'll see you
See ya.
next time. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.